Chapter 3. Finding Einstein. On the hot sunny morning of July 16, 1939, a Dodge coupe pulled to the sandy side of the road in the oceanfront town of Patchogue, New York. Out of the car climbed two sweat-soaked men. The men looked around, then began walking down towards the town's main street. Speaking with European accents that locals couldn't quite identify, the visitors asked for directions to the cottage of Dr. Moore. No one in town knew of such a place. The men went into stores and gas stations. No luck. They hiked back to their car and collapsed into their seats. Perhaps I understood the name Patchogue on the telephone, the driver said. Let's see if we can find some similar name on the map. Visibly irritated, the man in the passenger seat unfolded a map of Long Island. He ran his finger along the town names in tiny print. Could it be Peconic? Yes, that was it, the driver exclaimed. Now I remember. He started the engine. They got back on the road. Driving the car was Eugene Wigner. In the passenger seat sat Leo Szilard. Both were Hungarian-born physicists, both about 40, both Jews who had fled from Europe as Adolf Hitler rose to power. Both were tormented by the same question. What had German scientists told Hitler about the possibility of building the atomic bombs? They had no way of knowing, but this much was clear. Fission had been discovered in Berlin. Probably, German physicists were already working on the atomic bomb. This was a terrifying thought, especially since 6 months had already passed since Hahn's discovery, and the American president, Franklin Roosevelt, still had no idea that such a thing as fission even existed. Szilard and Wigner were determined to tell him. Step one of their plan was to find Albert Einstein, the world's most famous scientist. If Einstein sounded the alarm about the danger of a German atomic bomb, President Roosevelt might just listen. Wigner had called Einstein's office that morning. He was told the great man was on vacation, staying at a beach house he rented from someone named Dr. Moore in Patchogue, or was it Peconic? Something with a P. After an hour of leaving Patchogue, Wigner and Szilard pulled into Peconic. Once again, they asked around for the home of Dr. Moore. Again, no one knew. Let's give up and go home, Szilard sighed. Perhaps fate never intended it. Wigner shook his head. But it's our duty to take this step, he insisted. It must be our contribution to the prevention of a terrible calamity. So they drove slowly on, passing dunes and cottages. Szilard had an idea. How would it be if we simply asked where around here Einstein lives? Wigner spotted a young boy about 7 walking along the side of the road holding a fishing rod. He pulled over. Szilard leaned his sweaty head out of the car window. Say, he began, do you by any chance know where Einstein lives? The boy looked up and said, Of course. Albert Einstein stood on the porch of his rented cottage looking cool, tan, and relaxed in loose pants, a t-shirt, and slippers. His famous mane of white hair was windswept from the morning of sailing on Long Island Sound. He welcomed the wary Hungarians, inviting them to sit down and have some iced tea. After a few minutes of small talk, Szilard and Wigner brought up the subject they'd come to discuss. They told Einstein about the newest discoveries in fission and explained how uranium might be used to build devastating bombs. Einstein hadn't been following the fission research. He took a minute to process the science. Then he said, I hadn't thought of that at all. Einstein quickly realized that with atomic bombs, Adolf Hitler would be absolutely unstoppable. And Einstein was just as horrified as I was by that prospect, Wigner recalled. He volunteered to do whatever he could to prevent it. Wigner got out a pen and a piece of paper. He took notes as Szilard and Einstein worked out the text of a letter to President Roosevelt. 6 weeks later, on September 1st, 1939, Germany launched a massive invasion of Poland. Using a new style of attack known as Blitzkrieg, German for lightning war, Hitler's planes, tanks, and soldiers slashed deep into Polish territory. Britain and France had promised to protect Poland. They had no choice but to declare war on Germany. They did, but it had no effect on the German charge. Hitler's troops poured into Warsaw, Poland's capital in late September. On October 11th, in Washington, D.C., an economist named Alexander Sachs showed his ID to security guards outside the White House. He walked into the building with Albert Einstein's letter in his briefcase. Sachs was a former aide to President Roosevelt and a personal friend. He also knew Leo Szilard, and he told Szilard that he could get Einstein's letter directly into Roosevelt's hands. The start of the World War II had made it tough to get an appointment with the president, but he'd finally made it. Sachs was ushered into the Oval Office, where the president was seated behind his desk. "Alex," Roosevelt said, flashing his famously big smile, "what are you up to?" Sachs sat down. He asked Roosevelt to listen very carefully to what he had to say. Roosevelt poured 2 glasses of brandy, got comfortable in his chair, and motioned for Sachs to begin. Sachs explained the warning in Einstein's letter. The element uranium may be turned into a new and important source of energy in the immediate future, Einstein had written. One day, man will release and control its almost infinite power. We cannot prevent him from doing so, and can only hope that he will not use it exclusively in blowing up his next-door neighbor. Einstein urged the government to start working closely with the physicists to explore the possibilities of building atomic bombs. The letter ended with one last piece of information. Germany has actually stopped the sale of uranium from the Czechoslovakian mines, which she has taken over. This was a chilling clue. The Germans were grabbing all the uranium they could get. Why? Were they already working on a bomb? Roosevelt thought for a moment. "Alex," he began, "what you are after is to see that the Nazis don't blow us up." "Precisely." Roosevelt nodded. He banged his desk and said, "This requires action."